Welcome to an Ouchies Batrep about Batreps, or better known as Why I Suck. That's right, we're at 50 episodes. How did we get here? Now, it's a joke with the locals that if the camera's on, it's a surefire reason why I'm about to lose, because the thing is a bad luck charm. But it's not always the case. Sometimes with the camera on, it's very obvious that I just make some really poor decisions. But starting this Batrep series probably isn't one of them. I've enjoyed making all of them, with the exception of maybe a few, but in generally, it is very fun to do. And I sure hope you guys like it too, because according to YouTube analytics, there's been 346,000 minutes watched, or 240 straight days of viewership. The numbers are just staggering to me, and it helps me put into perspective that sometimes when I make these episodes, it's anywhere between, plus the time of actually playing it, anywhere between 1 and 6 hours to produce. It's a lot shorter now than when it used to be. Back in the early days, it took a lot of effort. In fact, the first one was a complete shot in the dark. I've always liked time-lapse photos, and I happen to notice that our Battletech games moved at such a monolithic pace that they could probably be time-lapsed and probably look nice doing it. So it actually started out as a complete shot in the dark. I happen to have a tablet that I wanted to test for industrial purposes. I wanted to test its battery life and see what it can do if it was put under stress for a long period of time. And in this case, I chose why not time-lapse on my own time. And this Asus slider actually ended up being really good for the job. It was a set up and forget affair. I didn't even have to plug it in. I just brought the stand, let it run. The idea was, and it's why you see the clock in a lot of the early ones, to see how long it lasts until it died. And it can go for about 8 hours of constant footage and still have a good third of the battery left. I was very impressed. I was not, however, impressed with this first video. It took me many hours to put together. Again, it was a complete shot in the dark, and it's nearly unwatchable. The thing is horrible. And on to the second Batrep, which is arguably my most famous one, because it is the one that you see linked everywhere. I am astounded every time that I manage to go somewhere, I'm researching something, and then I see, footage of my stuff, and it's almost invariably this Batrep, which is great. I'm glad people love it. This one, again, was a test of the equipment. We were still trying to figure out a good place to put the camera without it getting in the way, and this time it worked out just a little bit better. I happened to brought my Sony DSLR camera with me this time. Little small thing, had been around the world a couple times with me. So I figured, why not use it? And it ended up being an asset, and I started working that into everything else. In the previous Batrep, I do believe it was my BlackBerry phone that ended up taking the secondary shots. This one also features the voiceover work for the first time. This one was at the request of Iterant Hobbyist, which I wouldn't have done much of this at all if it wasn't for his nudging out the door. He is my Gandalf to these Batreps. And again, I think the narration on that one is kind of rubbish. This was back in a day when I had an infant sleeping just a room over, and I'm literally whispering into my LifeChat LX3000 Microsoft headphone just to keep him awake, because if he awoke, it would have been hell to pay. So the narration is very soft, it's dull, and then I go about saying that the Nightwolf isn't a very good anti-infantry mech. That is not true. In this particular case, it didn't really do it any good if it had a machine gun, but it is a great anti-infantry mech, but in this case, it was just overloaded for targets. The third Batrep was interesting for reasons that are not incredibly clear to the Batrep itself. It was the beginning of a campaign that was being ran by our buddy Memphis Mark, that this ended up being the only mission that I played in, and he took his Merc campaign up and rolled against the most heavily armed opposition that he possibly could on a clan homeworld, and it ended up being a disaster. I mean, I took Zellbringen just because the game wouldn't have been fun if it didn't do it. And you also see a little bit more technical sophistication in this one. This one, again, still took a while to put together, and I was really straining to see anything that could be done with the video pad editor, and it was really limiting. And third video in, I'm already starting to look for a better composition suite. This is also the only match in which you'll probably ever see me use a Battletech map, because we brought the terrain. The game looks so much nicer with terrain, but at the store we were playing at, we were crowded out by card players, and we felt wrong for just taking up as much space for a miniature war game, and this ended up being the last time we ever played at Hobbytown. We ended up moving to the store we all know and love right now, that I love so much that it actually has a promo in it. And it's our first game over at Mid-South Hobbies and Games, and it turned out to be a rather nice one. This one I won because my buddy Mark completely threw aside what vehicles could do. He just completely lamented that they were useless, that there's no reason to take them, and yeah, I might be embellishing it a little, but he definitely didn't expect to be completely rolled over. He got a few lucky crits off in the beginning, or at least I did, and it was just kind of all over for him. It's the only thing I don't necessarily like about Battletech, because a lot of things can be left to chance if you get considerably lucky. As we continue on the pseudo campaign, in this Batrep I got aggressive, and I ended up assaulting a defensive position across a river with vehicles that couldn't cross water. It ended about as well as you could imagine it would have. Batrep 6 is when I started using the Nikon D5100. It is a proper camera. It was a graduation gift because I had took forever to graduate college. I insisted on paying my own way through it, and it ended up taking forever because I am very adverse to debt, and as a result I got a nice camera as a gift. And now you start seeing a lot of out of focus shots, or at least artistic-y things that can help draw focus to what's actually happening as I'm trying to make a better Batrep. I'm trying to make sure, or at least when I'm filming it, to keep the narrative alive, because that's something that Battletech does very well with its system. Now, it's been a while since the last Batrep, and we decided to go ahead and close out the Word of Blake campaign, tried to go it out on a big note, and it ended up being a complete disaster. The only thing that seemed to work that day was the tablet, which at this point had proven beyond a reasonable doubt that it could be used for an industrial purpose, but the project for that at work had fallen through. It was never going to happen. But nonetheless, it worked, and it was still being used for Batrep purposes, but everything else didn't work that day. The D5100 had its batteries exhausted. My backup camera, the Sony, had its batteries mostly exhausted. And then, true story, my son decides to paint the couch. He took one of the acrylic bottles that I had and managed to just lay it all over the couch. It was the first true time that we learned the horror of a silent child, because we had to call the game soon, so I had to go home and pack up all the Battletech stuff, because I haul all of that stuff to every game in an RX-8 and unpack it all. It takes quite a while to do. Nonetheless, we were grateful that my son decided to paint our gray couch gray. So, you know, small victories. Now, despite popular belief, I actually got back into miniature wargaming because of Yank Yeager, and he actually brought me into a game called Flames of War, which is actually really fun because there was, at the time, a very involved local community, and you can just get a game whenever you want. And that was important to me because before this, or shortly before I was playing Battletech, I had no one to play with. It was dark. I mean, I would want to play a game, but everyone was always doing something else or somewhere else, or for whatever reason it just never happened. And that's how I ended up painting my Lao Force. It was kind of out of despair. So this actually was the first army that I painted explicitly for the Batreps. I painted out an entire Italian Fusilieri company, and this is one of the first games that I played with them, or at least it's the second game that I played with them. The first one I didn't film. Number 9 was a whole heck of a lot of fun. It ended up being a very straightforward strategy. Just ply the Pioneer team in the center and hope for the best. And since he knew he was going to run an armor company, it was inevitable that he was going to run through the center section of the board. And I just kind of waited for it to happen. That's actually a long-standing theme with the Italian Fusilieri, that you make all your major decisions in deployment, and then the rest of the game kind of falls on whether or not you made a proper decision. This is also the first Batrep in which I started using zoom functions kind of dynamically. I actually accidentally cut out the section that was supposed to be the assault, the one that made the game, and I somehow accidentally applied the zoom filter on a piece of moving video, and it zoomed in on it and made it look awesome, and I thought, my god, I'm a genius. It's funny now, though, that I have an HD camera in the more recent Batreps, and I don't really use that function anymore. I don't do any kind of zooming on it. But I did in this one, and it turned out alright. This is around the time that the Batrep started getting into a routine. They were no longer taking an insane amount of time to do. And this is also, along with the one right before it, the time when I started moving over to Corel Video Studio Pro, which is an infinitely better system to do any kind of editing in. It's also way cheaper than the Adobe version, because the Adobe version's insane. I couldn't justify spending $500 for video editing software on a site that, to this day, even though I donated all the profits to charity, I've made $72. Batrep 10 was the watershed moment for me when I started learning more about narration styles. As a matter of fact, it was just a kind of a slow day. I had a vacation day that I had took. I was at home alone, so I had the whole house to myself. I could try any range of voice that I wanted, and I didn't have to worry about waking up my infant son. So, when I did the Batrep, I was still very calm and sedate, and I moved the Yamato forward, and I attacked the other ship, the Enterprise, and it exploded. And it was all nice, right? But it was when there was a natural emotional cue, when I rolled so many successive sixes to blow up the Iowa with the Yamato and decide the game right then and there. It was exciting when it happened in the actual game, and it was exciting again when I did the Batrep. And that's when I realized I really need to play with the vocal tone, or at least don't be afraid of the microphone, which is something that I could arguably say that happened in most of the previous Batreps. It's also interesting to note that there are some vocal communities concerning Ouchies Batreps and what they'd like to see. Number one is always Battletech. Everyone wants to see Battletech, and that's cool. I like engaging the audience and giving them what they want. And I love playing Battletech, even though it doesn't happen that much these days. But number two, the number two most vocal community, you'd be surprised to hear this, War at Sea. There's a lot of players out there for War at Sea, and I get a message pretty routinely through the YouTube channel about it. Now, it's hard to measure this, but I also get a lot of feedback for Flames of War. Just for the record. But they're usually more vocal over there on TG and sometimes on the official forums. Batrep 11 was High Frontier, and it was a difficult one to do. I didn't know how to record it. I didn't even know if it was Batrep material, but like everything else in this series, it has been a process of experimentation and learning. And in this case, I thought it would be way more interactive for the viewer if we used Legos to be able to, decorate our ships and make it look appropriate for what it was. And the Batrep ended up looking pretty well. I ended up changing up my presentation technique, creating a couple of the sidebars and whatnot, putting custom graphics in. And again, it's all a experimentation and a growth and understanding how Corel Video Studio Pro works. And in this particular case, it ended up looking pretty good. This is also arguably one of the longest edited ones. This one took easily about 8 hours of production to put together. If I did it again, as a matter of fact, when this is recorded, there's going to be another High Frontier one, and it did not take anywhere near as long. Of course, some of the glitz and splash is not really in there like there is in this one, but you'll see that it does look almost as good, if not better. Nonetheless, this is also a clear example of stupidity. My brother and I, we had played this game a lot, but we had not realized that radiators were completely optional, that there is a completely valid strategy in the advanced game to just take a water token and then open therm the reactor whenever you make any kind of thrust. So even though I say at the end that all the advanced thrust, all the avenues out to Triton were locked up through Mars, that's not explicitly true. There's ways around it. And it's just one of those things that you have to chalk up to learning. Though to be fair, this one is also one of the longest. It's easily within the top 5 longest games I've recorded. And speaking of recording, it's also the first one done with the HD camera. That's right. Batrep 12 is Flames of War with our buddy Yank Yeager, and it is also arguably one of the top 5 longest games I recorded. Again, I'm still working out the kinks of this camera that I have, and I'm having a great deal of trouble. As a matter of fact, I started off with a Canon, I think, and no, it was a JVC that ended up not working well. As a matter of fact, I recorded a whole painting tutorial on these tanks that I used in this particular Batrep, and it corrupted it all. It was horrible. I ended up taking it back to the store, and now I use a Canon, which is actually really nice. If there's an audio pop there, it's because the thing is so reliable that I actually forgot the manufacturer. I would buy another Canon again if given the chance. Batrep 13 is the beginning of the Tanker's Treat tourney, which was a fantastic tourney to go to in Little Rock. It's kind of the sister tourney of sorts to the Thanksgiving tourney that I run here every year. It started as a complaint that I was timing it wrong in art over here, so I ended up changing the time for the next one. But it's always kind of a cohabitated event, for the lack of a better term. So when they offered it, I cleared it with the wife. We headed over there, and it was awesome. I had a great time. I did not expect to win, not with a 4 King Tiger list. It was a lot of fun, but in this particular Batrep, I think I should have won it, but I just got screwed by the dice. There's a lot that could be said about the dice completely hosing you, and in this one it did, but to be perfectly honest, I lost when I did not put the minefield as far left of the board as I possibly could, thus allowing the tanks to get that far around. If I put it a little bit further to the left, the tanks would have been able to... They wouldn't have been as close, and I wouldn't have had the infantry having to charge out into the open. Say Livy. Round 2 starts to continue a theme that I would see a lot with the King Tiger list. When you're having to put your CO out there in the middle of the open, it gets hard to defend them. You're going to get overwhelmed. But in this case, I learned a valuable lesson about the King Tiger, and that's you need to get all your shots downrange. Never move if you can ever afford to. Just Stormtrooper. And in this case, I was losing most of my shots because I was just moving instead of Stormtroopering. And they got overwhelmed, they died, and the camera shot was awful on this one. It was everything I could do to correct it, but the table was on a raised surface, and I did what I could. It was a fun game. Fun game. Not for my commander, though, but everyone else had fun. Batrep 15, again, Tanker Treat tourney, and this is another one that was really hard to win because you're just being overwhelmed, and I picked a really lousy list. But again, it was really fun to see the expression on some people's faces. The newer guys, you could always tell when they take a look at it and they realize that there's just nothing you can do. I mean, there's some rudimentary things like vet troops, gone to ground, at range, but then you have an armor value so high that nothing that they have could puncture it. Oh, that was great in this Batrep. Nonetheless, I lost it too, and I also lost a little bit of my sanity because I got some of the rules wrong. I should have known better. Of all people, I should have known better. Nonetheless, we move back to Battletech with Batrep 16, and I think the narration was a lot better in this one. Again, I've started getting into the habit of recording when nobody else is around, when I can play with the volume and tone of my voice, and I don't have to be afraid of the microphone, and at least do it in such a way that I don't have to worry about all the punctuals or the plosives. I think that's what it's referred to. Again, I actually do a lot of reading regarding this. I loved Batrep 17 because it was just a clear example of flyboy superiority. I mean, granted, the air support in this one made the game, but it was the ground pounders on both sides that took the brunt of it. And it was hilarious. I loved this Batrep because I got to take all the credit for doing the meat of the work, but didn't take any of it on the chin. It was a great game. Of course, that couldn't really be said of my buddy Fatbird, which got hit with cluster rounds in almost the same amount as the enemy, though he weathered it better. Batrep 18 has the best gamer ever. It's Tank Rider. I do believe he should always get top scores in every game he's ever been in. He is just a stand-up fellow, and in this case he needed an opponent that was going to be representative of somebody that he was going to encounter at Wolf Creek. So I was more than happy to provide some commandos to fight against. I've since sold the commandos, actually, to a fellow in Canada, I do believe. It's a bummer, though. When the box got there, most of the bits apparently broke apart. But at least the painted ones didn't, because I packed the ever-living hell out of them. As we go back to Battletech and Batrep 19, again, 19, and we are 20 minutes into this thing, the game actually ended up being really nice. The camera loves these big 30,000 per side matches, and I love recording them because they're just so nice to look at. And in this game, we only had nice resolution because our buddy Fatbird, who was playing opposition in this one, decided to get really lulzy with a couple Ouchies. It was a lot of fun. And as we get to Batrep 20, again, Battletech, we start seeing a downside of these big 30,000 point plus matches. In this particular case, the game can really be metagamed by just player coordination. If the two or the multiple people on one side manages to coordinate themselves better than the other one, individual skill starts becoming completely irrelevant. And that started to becoming a recurring complaint where the game stopped being about individual actions, about you can show up, but you're not really in charge of your own formation. You're just in charge of the record sheets. And that's kind of a bummer about this one. So we started scaling it back underneath that revelation, or at least that understanding. And again, Battletech is still fun at smaller point scales. It's just not as interesting. And in this particular case, I try to demonstrate everything a clan player should do, and it falls flat in my face. Or at least falls down, explodes, and kills the pilot. Batrep 22 sees the introduction of heavy gear to the retinue. This is a game that I find hilarious in retrospect because I had sent the Spitting Cobra forward with its hack, thinking that's what it was there for. I did not even notice the stat line of the HRP until like 3-4 turns in, and then only by accident because I needed him to fire one more gun and he didn't. I just needed to make him fire something that wasn't the HRP, and it did a lot of damage. So by just sheer volume of example, I noticed that it was just completely awesome. So chalk one up for stupidity. As we continue to delve into heavy gear, we start experimenting with vehicles, and I loved this one too because the Khan just kind of showed up and won the game. There wasn't a whole lot of strategy to it. I mean, there was a little bit of a play in terms of reaction fire for the Cobras moving through the ruins, but really it was the Khan that showed up and just kind of took care of everything. Tank Rider once again wanted to test out his Italians, but I did not want to play any other mid-war army, so I played my Italians, so we just fluffed it as royal versus not royal, and I go ahead and throw in my strategy regarding tanks and just throwing them on one side of the board and charging as hard as you can, and this is the first time we started seeing the version 3 rules start really come into effect, and that ended up being a complete disaster. Don't follow my advice, boys and girls, because I am a horrible person. We go back to Battletech again for this Batrep, and again, we're following the theme, 5,000 point lists, because we can get them out the door a lot faster, and they're a lot funner, and there's a lot more interesting choices to be made during the game. We move back to Battletech. Again, small games. Did I mention that it's getting faster to edit these things? Because I knocked this one out in about 30 minutes to an hour. Batrep 27 had me use C3 and then hack my way to victory. It really was pretty straightforward. Batrep 28 saw me win by the skin of my teeth. I think chicken wire mesh was the only thing that was holding those tanks together. The start of the Shiloh campaign was an auspicious one. We started off the game where nearly everything died in the first few turns, and then I reconsidered my use of tanks altogether because my buddy Fatbird had been reading the rules, and he noticed what happened when a tank got hit with the futuristic equivalent of napalm. This one was also a complete bear to play. I cannot underscore just how long it actually took to play, and you'll notice it was barely 3 turns long. As we continue the campaign, my luck still holds. I think the strategy was generally sound in this one, but I ended up almost getting tabled anyway. And as we return again to massive games that the camera just loves, we start seeing a little bit of luck pull out as we start working our way back towards the victory circle and just barely edge out of victory. Technically. I mean, I admit I'd completely screwed up the scenario early on, but it would made for a more interesting game. Batrep 32 went to Solaris as I tried out a new narration style, trying to be hyper-aggressive and loud. It was fun. Batrep 33 saw the introduction of Name That Mech, because it seemed kind of apropos, considering we're introducing a unit to the normal play routine that was a surprise in the in-universe environment as well. Batrep 34 returns to heavy gear, because my brother and I had really started getting a hold of the rules and were able to demo it to other people, and we started getting a whole lot of traction for the game because it's so much more fun during the opponent's turn in the old version of Blitz, where you actually had some control of what was going on. It was not an I go, you go system, and that made it really stand out from the pack. That and the camera loves it. This particular match, though, was lost because of my stupidity. Again, if you check the Batrep, it's because I wasn't paying attention to the objectives. That won't happen again. Yeah, that'll never happen again, right? Stupid is as stupid does, as I paint up another army for the Batrep series, this time a T-34 horde, because it looks cool and I like the T-34, and I can do history no more justice than to send it into the jaws of a bunch of panthers. It ends appropriately. Continuing that trend, I re-looked at my strategy, played another scenario against them, and the exact same thing happened. In fact, this time my dice really were hosing me. I had like 5 or 6 bounced shots on the side of one panther. Little do you know, Batrep fans, that this is a result of a grudge match. Gebartson and I had made a bet to see who would paint out their army first, or at least a kind of a grudge match just to make sure that we both had painting armies for the new tanker treat tourney. We both managed to bring fully painted units. Batrep 38 saw the introduction of Patton and the Death Star that he is. He is scary. Batrep 39 saw the recurring grudge match where I play against Wartoy again, and this time he completely tables me. I think even in the rep that I start talking about being funneled one way or the other, and I thought I was playing him, but turns out I was the one being played in that one. Moving back to heavy gear, we start changing it up a bit as Defler starts toying around with paratroopers, and I start toying around with metagaming what he'll bring, because I have a rough idea on what his painted models are, and I start using it against him. And sometimes I win. Batrep 41 brings us to New Jersey, as I had a ecological summit that I was going to help bring the company that I work for into an eco-green setting. It's a long way to go to get our company completely green, but we are moving in that direction, and I took the opportunity to play our buddy Dave over at Gamers on Games, extending out my stay out there in New Jersey just so I can go get a couple games in. It was a lot of fun playing against them, and it was a huge learning experience. Taking some of that learning experience home, I noticed that the stealth cadre was almost untargetable for most of the game, and they were only getting damage through splash effects. So I took that back here to Memphis, took it against Defler, and completely wrecked him from deployment on. We started a beer rep series because, well, I was really reprehensible about actually running it as a normal bat rep for various reasons. I also recorded a demo game, something that I generally don't do, so if there's ever a lull in the bat reps, it's usually because I'm doing things I don't normally want to record, demo games in particular. Batrep 46 brings us full circle as I take the stealth system out again and completely make someone so angry that they were ready to start lighting things on fire, and to be fair, I don't terribly blame him. Batrep 48 brings us back to High Frontier with the advanced knowledge of knowing when and where we can start using open therm cooling for our thrusters, and we end up going a lot further in it. It's also the first Batrep in which I do pre-rendered scenes explicitly for the Batreps. I think it came out rather nice. And lastly, we try out the alpha rolls, which, you know, they look pretty good so far. And of course, there's also Batrep 50, which, whoa, trippy! So, it has been a long road, about 2.5 years of working on these things, and now I can firmly say that I am making a product that I would agree is completely mediocre. Nobody should watch it unless you're deaf and blind, in which case there's probably better media out there for you to listen to. But seriously, I do this because I remember the times when I had nobody to play against, and I was deathly afraid that I'm going to find myself again in a situation when I don't have an opponent. And I do this for everyone else out there that is in the same situation and just wants to see the game played. And so long as I remember that, I don't have any personal family problems that supersedes recording and playing games, and I'm entertained by making these Batreps, I will continue to put out another episode every week so long as I'm capable of doing it, which should be the foreseeable future. There are plenty of Batreps that I record and throw out, so there's always that. So, without any more, catch you later.